Greetings, and evening, everyone. And once again, welcome to the Wednesday Night Live. I still haven't come up with a good name, but to be honest, I think at this point, we might as well just call it Wednesday Night Live. So welcome to Wednesday Night Live. As always, welcome, pull up a chair, sit down. We've got some good stuff for you coming this evening. Like I say, hope you enjoy it and, stick around for it. So if you live in the UK... you might have noticed someone's died. I don't know if you can tell. It's a bit difficult to point out. But someone's died, and everyone's having a bit of a fuss about it, as they say. And it's, well, as I've said before, I'm not a rabidly anti-monarchy. I'm not rabidly anti-pro monarchy either. I just really don't care. So I thought today, with the stuff, or should we say, the recent developments going on in Ukraine, I thought we'd cover this because you may remember when we had our talk. I say talk, a little chat with Hapanwo, or Ben, about his thoughts prior to the Ukrainian invasion. And we've got another interesting video, not from him, but from someone else. We'll be going over that in a bit. And then maybe, I don't know, we'll do something else. I don't know. We'll see. we'll see what we are and where we are when we come to it. But as always, thank you very much, like I say, everyone, for joining me this evening. Like I say, please remember to hit that like, share, and of course the subscribe button if you are new. Like I say, do say hello in chat, because we've got so far this evening. We've got Colin, greetings to you from New York. Enzo the God, not my king. Chatty Rat, blank sheet of paper. Duke Vengeance, hello to you. Cathal OG, hello to you. Pretty Bird, yes, someone's died. Really? Yeah, and I know how you feel. The funeral hasn't even taken place, and I think a lot of us are just funeraled out. Simon says 55, hello to you. And so, yes, like I say, do say hello in chat, and like I say, we'll sort of keep the conversation going and flowing, as they say. So, as always, thank you very much for joining this evening, and let's crack on with our little chat about Ukraine. But first of all, before we get into sort of recent developments, like many people watching this from afar, it was sort of interesting to see which way this would go, because when this first all kicked off, I, like many people, thought Ukraine doesn't stand a chance here. Russia, this very, very strong, well, at least we thought at the time, was a very strong, competent military power. Within the first week, tried to strike a knockout blow as quickly as possible, but they failed spectacularly. And the Ukrainians chased them almost from, the gates of Kiev right back into Russia. And then, of course, they refocused their efforts towards the east, and they took Mariupol, coming from, Crimea, and sort of have entrenched themselves and created that land bridge between sort of, going in from Russia in towards Crimea. Now, if you may remember when we were talking with Ben back in the day, we fully said this, one of the big things that Russia wanted to do was to create another route to supply Crimea, because it had since its initial annexation, it's had its water supply cut off from Ukraine. And indeed, one of the best ways to actually supply Crimea is from its Ukrainian sort of connection. So, what we have really been witnessing for quite some time was almost very, very much a stalemate. Some, small victories we saw, we've seen, you've all seen sort of the footage of the drone strikes, et cetera, et cetera. We got some small level stuff. But what's taken place really within the past week, I think, has shocked everyone. I think it has even shocked sort of the pro-Russia people as well. This collapse that we saw on this, um, to quite a significant extent, that even they are now having to spin themselves in circles to explain that this wasn't a rout. This was just a planned withdrawal, guys. Don't worry about it. Russia's still going to win. So yeah. But just to show you the extent of sort of what's happened, and you're right, Duke Avengers, it was a full-on rout. Oh, Daily Blaze, good evening to you. Yep. This is the Russian version of Vietnam, probably. Probably. But this is the live map that we've got from Ukraine. And this goes back at the moment, I've got it to the 2nd of September. So you can see at the moment, before the sort of offensive was set to take place, it had sort of already kicked off down here in Kherson, as you can see. Lots of sort of artillery strikes in and around there. But you can see the Ukrainians slowly pushing the Russians back, but also very much focusing on taking out the bridges here, because that will come into a very big point in a moment. So remember that. But what we weren't expecting, of course, was up here. And of course, very early on, they thought that we were going to expect to see another encirclement of Kharkiv. And this has pretty much been where it's at. This has been the stalemate. Nothing has really moved, along sort of this line and sort of this axis for quite some time. And people were thinking this is going to be sort of in the stalemate. It wasn't really going to move pretty much from this. But of course, we go to the 3rd, to the 4th, to the 5th, to the 6th, nope, to the 7th, 8th, where this probably starts to filter in. In fact, I think this is where no, it isn't. I don't think you get to see it, unfortunately. But as you can see, they're already making that push. The 9th, so you can see they've liberated Izium, which is a big strategic blow to Russia, as that's a big supply hub for them, which is where you've been seeing a lot of the boxes of ammunition and all the tanks. But that's not yet. It's not yet finished. Boom. Just to go. That was the 9th, and that is the 10th. That is now the 11th. And of course, we'll go through right to today, where we are at now. All that territory has been liberated. So make no mistake, this is a massive victory for Ukraine. And it's not over yet. It's not over yet. from what we can see. This offensive still seems like it is full swing, but it is not over yet, but at least by a long shot from what we can see. Oh, 91 leads. Hello to you. Oh, V Crew, I didn't see you sneak in there. Hello to you. So, as you can see, completely pushed all the Russians out of here, lost a major supply hub and a railway hub as well, because I think we've talked about this before. There is one railway, like this is how bad Russian logistics is. You can see at the top there, Belgorod. There is one railway line which sort of comes into Ukraine through all that territory. They don't have that anymore now. So the Russians were already having severe logistical problems. And that's before you even throw in to the effects of what the drones have had, what the HIMARS have had on the logistical situation as well. The fact that they've lost a major supply route in this section where the Ukrainians have liberated is a massive, massive blow to Russia. But as we said, doesn't stop there. That's what's been going on in the northeast. Oh, Ben Ridings to you, Ben. Ben Ridings, good evening to you. But of course, what's been going on in the south? Because there's a couple of interesting things that are still going on down here. So this is Kherson. This was where we were expecting the main thrust to come. This is what we're expecting the main thrust to come from. And it has been moving, as you can see. They've certainly pushed them away from Mykolaiv, and they're pushing them back towards Kherson. But with the HIMARS, what they've been doing for some time now is targeting supplies on this side of the river, but also taking out as many of the bridges as they can along this river. Why? Because while all this was going on down in the south, Russia was sure that they were going to come here as well, that this was where the main thrust was going to be. So they shifted a ton of troops into this here. And if they block off all this logistical supply points, these bridges, there's a ton of Russian troops that are now captured in there, that are now bottled up in there. And this yet again presents a fantastic opportunity for Ukraine, because as you can see, there's been a bit of action here. A lot of people are saying this is where the next big push is going to be, to drive a wedge down into here and to make her go for the coast. Because if that happens again, not only does this cut this land bridge, which is again another big supply route for all those Russian troops in Kherson, meaning that they now have to be supplied from Crimea. But if the Ukrainians manage to get to the coast, they can start to use HIMARS, and as they have done already, to start attacking this bridge. Because that is along here. Oh, no, it's not there. But I think this is the only one. Yep. So this bridge here is the only bridge that is then supplying into Crimea. You can see the massive just situation Russia is going to find itself in a couple of days, and it's not going to be good. And to be honest, good. We aren't pro-Russia on this channel by any way, shape, or form. But the fact that this is where all the action is probably going to be in the next maybe a couple of weeks, coming months, is potentially winter is coming, which will probably slow down a lot of the offensives themselves. But it will also provide new challenges to Russia because, snow's a bit difficult. Snow's a bit difficult. Makes it a bit difficult to transport stuff logistically. And in this part of the world, it still snows quite significantly. So make no mistake, this is probably where we are going to be seeing a lot of action in the next coming days. And it will probably be where we will see a lot of more losses for Russia. And if that is anything to go by, the fact that the Ukrainians recaptured more territory than Russia has actually managed to capture in the entire length of the war so far. Yeah. Interesting times. But then, of course, we've also got the potential that this offensive here could drive into here. It's possible. Well, we'll have to see what the Ukrainians do. But I think with the onset of winter now, I think you'll start to see things maybe slow down a bit because it isn't really a good idea to go and conduct full, military operations during winter. It just makes it all that bit more difficult. And if Russians have been having such a problem during this time when, there isn't that, yeah, it's insane to think at the start of this war, everyone was thinking Russia is going to steamroll Ukraine. Myself included, because that's what Russia had sort of presented itself to be. That's what every military analyst at that time had seriously thought. That's the game that was going to happen. But it hasn't turned out like that. Mostly it has been because of the weapons that we have been sending in over to Ukraine. And those weapons, the HIMARS systems, we've actually seen in that big advance up in the north. There were British, I think they're called Spartan transports. They were making a huge effort for that. So the equipment that we've been sending is working, and it just goes to show you that when they have that type of support, those types of weapons, they can beat the Russians. So, Jem, good evening to you. Oh, Gluttonous back in. Yeah. I'm still waiting for Russia to send their actual army. Should have about, quote, 1 million soldiers and 2 million reserves playing with their feet somewhere. This is it, because most of that army, if Putin actually has to escalate this into a war, he's going to actually have to start conscripting from his main base of support. And so far, the troops that have been thrown in to fight in Ukraine aren't from his main base of support. This is why you've got a lot of fighters from Chechnya in there fighting on the Russian side. And there are some on the Ukrainian side as well. Let's be fair. But most of these conscripts in Russia aren't there. And if you've seen some of the videos of some of the captured Russian troops, honestly, it looks like some have barely even shaved for the first time. Like, this is really, really bad for Russia. The fact that they are having to pretty much, to use the Hearts of Iron term, go to, scraping the barrel already. Service by requirement, I think, is the most, deepest one you can go onto on Hoi 4. But This is a disaster, and even on Russian television, for the first time, we've actually seen someone openly questioning whether this is a good idea. So make no mistake, this is starting to hit home. And I think it's starting to hit home with the Russian population as well. What is really going on here? Um, so now you've been sort of, caught up on sort of the situation. Like I did say, we will catch up every so often on the on the Ukrainian situation, um, whenever stuff happens. Um, but yeah, all that stuff has happened, and probably stuff could happen, as you can see in the area we're looking at here. Um, maybe the next sort of 2 days. Yeah, two vendors. Yeah, switching to armchair general mode. you know, yeah, that's what we were saying earlier. That's what they probably might do if they can even. They don't even have to take Mariupol if they can get to the coast. The HIMARS are in range of the bridge to Crimea, and one or two of those missiles puts a hole in the bridge, maybe not fully destroying it, but causing enough disruption that the logistical problems just become even more of a nightmare. And it's not just that as well. It's morale issues and even leadership issues that we've seen up in the north. There were a load of intercepted communications because, Russians using uncrypted, comm systems or outdated comm systems where even hackers or the amateur radio enthusiasts in Ukraine have been hacking into their comm system and have been listening to them talking to the point where we've seen soldiers talking about how support for them was meant to be coming. There were meant to be reinforcements on the way. They had no orders. They had no idea what was going on. So when it came time to run, it was just like, okay, guys, let's just run to the border. That's the only thing we know how to do. Let's just run to the border. And it was a complete and utter rout. Completely. So, yep, like I say, that's the current state of play, really in Ukraine. And like I say, Ukraine's had a massive victory. I say you cannot say what has been achieved here is anything short of an actual victory. Um, it is an absolute victory for Ukraine now, and it puts even more pressure on Russia. It um, shortens the line of engagement for Ukraine's, puts them in a more potential tactical position because if you're going to cross anywhere, you're going to cross here. And if you cross into here, well, then you then threaten the entire, northern border of all this as well. So make no mistake, we'll just have to see how this, continues on. But yeah, massive victory for Ukraine there, like undeniable. Yep. So this is the air defense system that they've got, basically defending this bridge for as much as they possibly can, because if they lose that bridge, they're almost screwed. And Ukrainians have actually been sending drones over there to test their air defense systems. Because, like I say, if you even put a hole in that bridge, you don't even have to destroy it. You don't even have to You don't even have to destroy the bridge. You just have to start putting holes in it. You just have to start disrupting the transport across it. And the second you start doing that, it just so yep. Did you hear some of the 60 local politicians in Urumta in Urumta in Russia demanded Putin to resign? Of course, it won't happen, but it's noteworthy to see more public criticism in Russia is happening, even on the state media. Exactly. That I think that will grow, and I think that will be certainly the um, biggest challenge for Russia to go to for Putin to go up against. Because I don't know if you noticed over the weekend, he'd actually blocked off Red Square, partly because um, whenever like a big revolution happens in Russia, um, tends to happen in Red Square. so they so they blocked it off just in case. But yeah, as always, you know, we wish Ukrainians the best. Like I say, yeah, Putin has a sad face indeed. Yeah, indeed he does. He has a very sad face. Yep. Mogrim, no one hacked the Russian communications. It's the amateur or the hobby radio enthusiasts. Simply just use their unsecured frequency. That is true. That's probably one of the amazing parts of all this. The fact that they're using equipment that's just completely unsecure, that you can just have like amateur or hobby radio enthusiasts just hack, just start listening into their conversations. It's it's honestly it's been insane. And if you've seen a lot of the other channels that are sort of following this more closely, you've had a lot of the comms between like Russian troops phoning home, telling them that they're trapped in a encirclement. He's not going to get out, so he's saying saying goodbye to his wife. Um, you know, a, you know, a bit sad, but at the same time, it's like, you know, um, well, if they have them, why haven't they been deployed again? The army, yeah. So yeah, Russian hasn't fully mobilized yet. They aren't, because part of it is um, to stop all this stuff. Because if Putin does this and says that, oh, this isn't a special military operation, it's a full blown war, then he will face a lot more consequences. Yes, he will have a lot more resources to play with, but then this is where a lot of the more consequences come in. I think it's already somebody said that you've got Moscow and St. Petersburg have very much been exempt from some of this conscription that has been going on in place to try and drum up support and try and get more troops in there. Um, because that's where Putin's base is. That's where his support base is. If that goes, that's done. That's game over for Putin. If they say nope, then it's game over for Putin completely. Yeah, that's someone else who I definitely recommend as well. In fact, Dylan Burns has really been following this for really since this all started. And he's as you said, he's actually now over in there reporting what's going on, and he's done some fantastic um, videos and interviews with like some of the people on the ground. And I think he was in Bucha where he's interviewing like some of the survivors, getting their testimony of what went on over there. And I think that's massively important. So if you aren't, sub to him or you've never heard of him before, then certainly go check him out. Certainly well worth it. Yeah, that's also a fair point as well. Yeah. Um, we also learned this week that um, Russia is having to buy a ton of equipment off North Korea. It's just like, well, why is this again, this supposed military power, this supposed military superpower having to buy equipment of North Korea? You know, what's going on there? What happens when you have to be in such a state where you have to go and get your supplies from North Korea? Interesting to see if North Korea troops or Iranian troops going to Ukraine. I don't think Iranian troops will go into Ukraine. I don't think Iran is going to do that. I don't think they're um, anywhere close to it. But North Korea, maybe it depends if the North Koreans are actually up to it and what they get out of it. Because for quite some time, um, especially in Russia, North Korea has shipped out massive gangs of sort of North Korean workers to go and work in Russia to do like dig trenches or stuff like that because that's how they get a lot of their money. That's how they support the North Korean economy. So if he wants to go and support that, maybe Kim Jong Un might do that. We might go to Putin. Hey, Putin, you're having a hard time. Well, here's um, here's a load of North Korean dissidents that I need to get rid of. Throw them into the meat grinder. It's not impossible, not beyond the realms of possibility. Um, will they do it? I doubt it, but I won't be surprised. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. Um, Russia is fully mobilized as a standing army. Don't forget, for every soldier with a gun, you have 3 people behind. Drivers, mechanics, so on, as pouring almost all of his forces in. So he hasn't yet. He hasn't fully mobilized. But he's fully mobilized sort of the special part of the army, which is makes this sort of even worse because technically all the soldiers that are being thrown away here are sort of like the special, more specially trained soldiers. These aren't like the conscript hordes, shall we say, that we constantly hear that Russia has. And to, like I say, to do that, he would actually have to go full mobilization. But even here, we've seen recruiting drives in sort of some of the remote, areas of Russia, in the remote sort of states in Russia, offering cash bounties to come and join the war. It's bad. It's so bad in Russia at the moment, and the fact that they are failing this hard in a war that they started, yeah, it's hilarious. It really is. It really is. But we're gonna go because I promised it. I promised you a video. I promised you a video. But we are gonna go over to this. Hang on. There we go. There we go. So this is whenever I've talked about or done something about Russia, there's always this one guy who says, you aren't listening to the correct sources. You need to listen to this to this channel. So, so today we're going to the Duran. I think that's how you say it, or the Duran. But this was filmed before this, so it'll be interesting to see what these guys will probably have to say now after all this is over. But yeah. We'll speed it up first because, like I say, it's a long video. Like I say, we don't probably have time to cover it all today. There we go.
Yes, welcome everyone. Today is the 19th of August, 2022. My name is Glenn Diesen. I'm a professor at the University of Southeastern Norway. And with me is the always excellent Alexander McCoris from the Duran. And last but not least, we have Scott Ritter, a former US Marine Corps intelligence officer, military expert, intelligence expert, and also, of course, an American patriot. Many probably familiar with Scott Ritter as UN weapons inspector who have overseen the disarmament of weapons of mass destruction. And I guess you publicly argue that Iraq had no WMDs before the war, and well, if people had listened to you then, I assume many lives would have been spared. And I also believe that many lives would have been spared if our leaders would have listened to you about this current crisis in Ukraine as well, a war which could seemingly very easily have been avoided. So, Scott Ritter, this is a real pleasure.
Yeah, remember, guys, this war could have easily been avoided. Yeah, because all Russia had to do was not invade Ukraine. That's all they had to do. Russia just had not to invade Ukraine. That's it. That's all they had to do.
Sure.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And Alexander, it's great to see you again.
Yeah, mutually. Absolutely.
So, let's just jump into it, I guess. Well, I was thinking the narrative of the West concerning this war in Ukraine, it continues to change, from unfettered optimism to more pessimism, which seems to have set in now. But like the big questions, I guess, is
Oh, is the sound not good? Hold on. I'll put my headphones in then. Hang on. Oh, yep. Yep, you're right, V Crew. Tankies. Hopefully, I might have to just check, because it does this sometimes whenever you put this headphones in. Let me just check. Oh no! Oh no! It's done it. There we go. There we go. So hopefully, guys, this sound should be better. Hopefully.
What is the state of the Russian military? Because we keep saying it's all powerful, it's just a corrupt flop. But if Russia has such a powerful military, many people are asking why hasn't Russia been able to defeat the Ukrainians?
And yeah, that's what many analysis did. By the way, is the sound better? Just before we continue on, was the sound better? Just like I say, hopefully that might have been solved. If it might have been echoing, reverberating through my microphone. Much better. Echo gone. Excellent. So, yeah, that was the case. Everyone thought Russia had this, state of the art, ready to go military that could fight, be ready to fight literally on its doorstep. That's what everyone was assuming. Everyone assumed that because at the time, there was no reason not to assume that the Russian military wasn't going to perform as bad as it is. You know, we've seen that, how bad it went on to perform. So prepare yourselves. Prepare yourselves. And yeah, you are right, V Crew. Tankies.
And who are you throwing that at?
Sorry. Yeah, you, Scott.
Okay. Look, let's start off by just stating a statement of fact. Russia is not 10 feet tall. The Russian soldier is not a Superman. They are capable of making mistakes. They have made mistakes. They will continue to make mistakes. And that's just the way it is. So this notion that Russia is, somehow this perfect war machine that's just, do no wrong, and therefore, why on earth haven't they won this war already? What an absurdity. Ukraine started this conflict with the second largest military in Europe after Turkey. It was one of the most well-trained militaries in Europe, one of the best equipped militaries in Europe, one of the best led militaries in Europe. And
again, not really the case. I think in terms of sort of, hang on. Largest armies in Europe. So according to this, not so. According to this, Sweden, Poland, and Greece have larger ones, and Turkey is not on the list either. At least according to this list. Let's have a look. See if we can find another one. 25 most powerfulest militaries in Europe. Here we are. Below, you can see the most 25 powerful militaries in Europe. So ranked 25th, Belgium. Let's get to so Ukraine. Ukraine is ranked 10th at this. 9th is Greece. 8th is Poland. 7th is Spain. 6th is Italy. 5th is Germany. 4th is Turkey. 3rd is the United Kingdom. 2nd is France. And 1st is Russia. Not 100% sure that's 100% true in that.
Because of the ongoing conflict in eastern Ukraine, it was one of the most combat experienced armies in Europe. Let me put it another way. If the Ukrainian army fought against the German army, it would have destroyed the Germans. The Ukrainian army would have crushed the Polish army. The Ukrainian army would have swept the floor with the Romanian army, with the French army, with the Italian army. That's how good the Ukrainians were and are.
Again, hypotheticals. You've got to understand that. I also think you've got to take into the consideration the fact that the Ukrainians here are fighting to defend their home. And that counts for a lot. So I think here he's trying to sort of very, very much big up the Ukrainian army by saying, oh, look, it doesn't matter, the Russians are having losses now, but don't worry about it, guys. That it's only because the Ukrainians are so good. They're so good.
Very professional, very well trained, very motivated, by the way. So the notion that Russia was going to come into Ukraine and somehow just wipe this very capable military force aside is absurd. And we saw this. We saw Russia initiate this conflict.
But that wasn't true at the time. That's not true. Back in 2014, when this all really first started kicking off, the Ukrainians got kicked left, right, and center. So there was every reason to believe when this sort of conflict was going to be renewed that the same thing might very well happen again. Now, of course, it didn't. In fact, the way that Putin has sort of acted, threatening to annex, more parts of Ukraine and the rest of the stuff, that seems to be how it went. So I very much think he's sort of trying to play up the Ukrainians, which okay, I'm fine with, but yeah, saying that the Russians were they'll learn from the mistakes. Well, we've just seen how competent the Ukrainians are at taking territory, just in the past couple of days.
Using a plan of action that I think underestimated Ukraine's capabilities. We saw Russia send flying columns forward with little regard to flank security and rear security, and the Ukrainians were successful in ambushing many of these columns and inflicting heavy casualties on the Russians. This is just a statement of fact. But what Russia has is a very well-trained military of its own, possessing
yes, yeah, the very, very well-trained Russian military. I don't think so. Given how they're performing, they don't really be seeming to put this training to too much use. Whoops.
A very competent doctrine led by some of the best trained officers, the best trained officer corps in the world, people who understand the art of war, and
this best trained officer corps in the world. Bear in mind, this best trained officer corps in the world, recently, when they learned that the Ukrainians were coming, did a runner first and left their men behind. I wonder what page that's on the Art of War. At what point did Sun Tzu say, yes, if you know the enemy is coming, as a commanding officer, run off and let your troops handle it. Yeah. Well-trained officer corps. Yeah. Well-trained officer corps there. You are right, Vikra. That has a lot to do with it. That does have a lot to do with it. They have a professional army, but it's something like 200k from 800k people. Is that Ukraine or Russia? I think it's probably Russia. Maybe that amount. Yeah. Yeah, of war for all occasions like this, I'll flip through. Yeah. Look at what it says about about that.
Military that has increasingly become professional in character, transitioning away from this conscript-based military that maybe was dominating back in the early 2000s up until maybe 2008. But the 5-day war with Georgia was a big wake-up call for the Russians about the inadequacy of their training, their equipment, their doctrine. What we have is a Russian military that knows what it's doing, and the biggest sign of a professional is the ability.
Yeah, the Russian military knows what it's doing, guys. This is what's fun about going to these channels. This is what's fun about going to these channels after stuff like this happens, because you can just see where these people's interests lie, and it's not on the Ukrainian side. I'm sure they will disagree, but
to adapt well under adversity. And the Russians went in with with one way of doing things, and quickly realized that they needed to adapt. That the Ukrainians were very competent, and that Russia needed to change its methodology. And they did so by focusing on the primary problem confronting, which was this heavily entrenched Ukrainian force defending eastern Ukraine, defending the areas of the Donbass that were under Ukrainian control for the last 8 years. And I need to emphasize that, heavily entrenched. This is a Ukrainian military that's been dug in to, some of the most extensive trench works that have been seen since World War I, with reinforced concrete blockhouses, positions. If you make a move on one position, you're getting hit by others. Their artillery has registered every square inch of this, so that when the Russians come to a particular piece of ground, the Ukrainians already have the firing solution figured out. And if they have artillery available, they're able to bring artillery to bear on this piece. So this is an extraordinarily difficult military problem. And the Russians have been able to come up with what I would say the perfect storm of military capability to solve this problem. They have taken full advantage of their overwhelming superiority, I would even say supremacy.
So funny, because this was uploaded on the August the 21st. Given what I just showed you earlier on, given what I just shown you, do you think what's gone on in the past couple of days in Ukraine matches with what this guy is saying? Absolutely not. This doesn't match one single bit.
And artillery to create a methodology of conflict that focuses on executing the mission without any time constraint. And this is sort of unique in military history. Almost every time a war is fought, military commanders are under time pressures to accomplish a mission. You need to take Hill 861 by 1,500 hours on the third day. And so lives are sacrificed in the interest of getting this objective on time. The Russians have removed the calendar from the equation. They don't care about time. All they care about is accomplishing the objective, which is to inflict maximum casualties on Ukrainians with minimum casualties on the part of Russia. And they have,
given from what, because we don't know the official casualty figures. We don't know the official casualty figures yet. It seems Russia, I think, has probably lost a lot more troops than they are willing to admit. I think they have lost a lot more than they are willing to admit. Who is this person? This is Scott Ritter. This person at the bottom. But yeah, given what's happened in the past couple of days, what he's saying now is just completely ignores the situation that's just gone on ground. And now, of course, this was done sort of before this happened, but even then, the fact that you had, I think, a couple of days before, this is when the HIMARS were starting to really come into effect. I don't know if he's even going to talk about this in this interview, but yeah, yeah, you are right. Yeah, it's a comedy act. It really is. It does not reflect the reality of what's going on the ground.
They have come up with a way of operating that is doing just that. They are grinding their way through eastern Ukraine, inflicting unheard of casualty ratios. You know, normally in war, an attacker wants a 3-to-1 advantage, numerical advantage over the defender. So for every single Ukrainian dug in, there should be 3 Russians. And then you're going to get through this attacking a casualty ratio that roughly is 1-to-1. I mean, historically, some of the biggest battles that are fought in modern history, in World War II, et cetera, you have casualty ratios of 1 to 1.2, 1.4, which means that the 100,000 of you are fighting 100,000 of them. There's going to be a battle, and eventually you're going to grind it down to where you have about 80,000 of you left. There's about 60,000 of them left, and they realize that you've achieved the superiority, and they start to withdraw, or they retreat, or they surrender. The Russians right now are achieving casualty ratios. I don't mean to laugh because this is war and people are dying, and I don't, I don't mean to minimize this, but I have to say, as a military man, to go on the offensive against a dug-in enemy like this, and to achieve casualty ratios of 10, 15, 20, sometimes 30-to-1 is unheard of in military matters. And I think increasingly people in the West are starting to look at this. A lot of Western military observers were looking at the Russians early on, and they were a little dismayed because we had all been raised in the operational military mobility group. This brigade-sized, division-sized tank force that was going to break through the line, get into the rear area, big sweeping arrows. And when the Russians didn't do that, we're all like, they're overhyped. They're not as good as they thought they were, as we thought they were. And now we're basically recalibrating, going, these guys are really good, really good. They're fantastic. I wouldn't want to go up against them.
What? Even by okay, let's give this guy the benefit of the doubt. This was filmed, as we said before, a couple of days before this big offensive. Even by then, it was very clear that the Russians were not competent, that they were not in any way really fit army to be going up against the Ukrainians. As we've seen before from a lot of these captured footage, throwing in, basically kids who hadn't even seemed to have, shaved for the first time ever. The morale is completely shot to pieces. They did not want to be going into Ukraine in the first place, and it has only become worse for them. It is so bad for these people. And you've got this guy here bigging up Russia. Now you've got to ask, why is he bigging up Russia? What for? Well, I think at the end of the day, they're just going after. I don't know. Just I want to be sort of anti-Western and big up Russia, because obviously there's a lot of you'll notice that a lot of very right-wing people like Russia quite a bit for obvious circumstances. Yeah, this guy lives in a fantasy, but he plays with tin soldiers. Exactly. Exactly.
Because these guys have mastered the art of war, in which they have maximized all of their strengths while exploiting every weakness of the enemy. Anecdotally, we hear the Ukrainians say, we go to the front lines ready to fight the Russians. We're ready. We're prepared. We get to the front lines, and we spend the next few days getting slammed by artillery. We lose 50, 60% of our force, so they pull us out. We never saw a Russian. How demoralizing is that for an enemy?
Yeah, guys, the Ukrainians have The Ukrainians have never seen a Russian. Um, you are right. Ayuki, Ayuk. Fantasy World. And by the way, this is the guy that all these right-wing people who were saying, yeah, Russia's winning. Yeah, go Russia. This is the guy that all these right-wing channels bring in to back up their claims that in reality, Ukraine's losing. It's losing so much. You shouldn't be supporting Ukraine, guys. Give up. They're losing, guys. Look. Here's my military friend. He says they're losing. Aren't I right, guys? Time to stop supporting Ukraine. But that's exactly what that's why they bring this guy in to support their ludicrous theory. Yeah, victory. Yeah, the ice eye from Finland. It's not just that. They've got drones. Drones have played a massive role in this war. It's part of the reason why Russia doesn't have air superiority, because of these drones. They've got radar-seeking missiles. So when Russia does turn on its air defense system, these missiles just go boop, boop, like that. You've got the HIMARS, which Russia currently has no counter to, because these missiles are flying in at such a low altitude, the air defense system can't target them. Oh yeah, that's also true as well. Yeah, Russian troops also keep Instagramming themselves. In fact, did you see the? There was a photo of a Russian tourist in Crimea who gave away like the location of Russian air defense systems because he took a photo of himself on the beach next to them. Just so yeah, this guy's living in complete fantasy la la land. Be fascinating what this guy has to say now. Be fascinating to see what this guy's saying now about Ukraine's massive success. But he wouldn't surprise me if he's probably filling in the dots of many of these, whatever all the other pro-Russia people are saying. Basically, oh, don't worry, guys, it's not a rout, it's just a tactical withdrawal. Russia's just withdrawing.
To engage in close combat, your enemy, you go to the front line, you suffer horrific casualties, and you never saw the enemy. This is the reality of war. And then when they do see them, it's usually after you've been pulverized into nothing. Now you have these well-trained light infantry forces supported by armor coming into the trenches and digging you out with bayonets and grenades and rifle fire, and it's a clean sweep. So the Russians are doing fantastic on the
clean sweep, guys.
But they don't care about the clock. They don't care about the calendar. They are going to accomplish their missions in a way that maximizes Ukrainian losses, minimizes their. And I'll just finish with this. There's some documents that were leaked out of the Ministry of Defense, Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, that suggest that by the end of June, early July, that the Ukrainian armed forces had suffered 191,000 casualties. 191,000. That's just the Army. That doesn't include the Air Force, Border Guards, and other forces. When you factor in everybody, the total number of casualties is around 250,000 casualties. That's a number actually that I've been throwing out for a while, saying that when I look, I'm not going to claim that I'm, God's gift to anything. I'm not. But I've studied war and I've been at war long enough to where I'm able to do what's called military math in my head. I can take a look at an array of forces. I can look at the firepower available, the doctrine.
Yeah, this guy. what can I say? His math is way off. His math is way off. Yeah, I can do that too. 30 years of StarCraft. Yeah, that's it. You don't understand, guys. We've had the me and gluttonous Machina. We've had the experience of years of tactical Zerg rushing. We'd build up our little Zergly forces and we'd run them through and we'd win this game in a minute. That's the true StarCraft player way. Yeah, and that is the truth. If they had actually suffered this amount of casualties as what he is claiming, it'd be true. The Russians would be at Poland and Romanian's borders. Tall Hat Man, bayonets? Question mark. Is this the First World War? P.S. I have to quote one YouTuber. Ukrainians are the same people as the Afghan and Vietnam, Russia have the watches. They have the clocks. Ukrainians have the time. It's very true. Yeah, it's like I say, this is a fantasy. He is living, I think, in a fantasy world. Let's see if we can't find him. I'm very interested to see what this guy is saying. Oh, he's written an op-ed for Russia Today. I wonder which side he's on, given the fact that he's written an op-ed for Russia Today. Does he have... Doesn't have a lot of social media profiles. He's got a YouTube channel, which is in Russian. Yeah, strange how this former retired US general now has like a Russian YouTube channel. Yeah. Yeah, completely an unbiased source then. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, hold on. I'll show you this because this is hilarious. Let me show you it. It's Scott Ritter Rus. Oh, so it might have two. I might have found his Russian channel. Let's see if we can find some. Here we are. So here's his actual proper channel. Oh, yeah. Russia will gain all its lost territory. New Russian forces ready to deploy. Russians lost their men to save their civilians. Come on, Poland, wake up, saying, Poland should give up on Ukraine. 2 weeks ago, Russians kicking the crap out of Ukraine. Nothing can help the Ukrainians change the tide. Whoops. Whoops. So yeah, this guy is just a complete stooge, essentially.
Available the terrain, blink my eyes 4 or 5 times while the algorithm runs in my head, and they say this is the anticipated outcome at this cost. And when I took a look at what was going on in eastern Ukraine, I said, that by the summer of this year, Ukraine would have suffered 250,000 casualties, and it turns out that's exactly what they've suffered. Now that's not dead; that's 250,000 casualties. But of that 250,000, you're looking at between 70,000 and 80,000 killed in action. That's a lot. That's a whole bunch. That doesn't mean that the Russians haven't suffered casualties themselves. They have. My clicking of my military math suggests that the combined Allied casualties for the Russians is around 15,000 dead, and they were probably looking at in the area of maybe 25 to 30,000, maybe up to 40,000 wounded. So 55,000 Russian casualties total. Now, most of those casualties took place early on in the conflict, whereas with the Ukrainians, the Ukrainians have always suffered more casualties than the Russians. But if you graph it out, what you have is the Russians starting here at casualties, and then they're
This is it, the great military mind, people. The Ukrainians are destined to lose, because if you've ever played, Hoi 4, it's armchair general this out, because if he can play, in the realm of fantasy, then so can I. When you play Hoi 4, you know that eventually you will come to a point where you run out of manpower. When you run out of manpower, you are screwed. Essentially, you cannot have your units be filled up. You're getting no new men. You're basically looking at complete and total utter collapse. And that can tend to happen, especially if you play, small countries like Romania, or you get caught up in the grind in, the sort of the Soviet push. You can start off initially with a lot of manpower, but that can very, very quickly end up gone very quickly if you're not careful. But if this guy is seriously saying, that Ukraine has suffered this amount of casualties, why is Ukraine not folding? He's saying that this summer, bear in mind, we've passed this point already. They should have fallen to pieces by now. Where are they? Oh, that's right. Ukraine has just had a massive victory in the northeast. So again, just engaging complete fantasy here.
Casualty figures are dropping down, nearly flatlining as close to zero as you can get today. And the Ukrainian casualties.
Yeah. That's it, guys. You just heard it there. Russia has had next to zero casualties.
We're always up here, but they've gone and now they're spiking. And so, even though these numbers suggest that there's some sort of, I'm not going to say equality, but there's that the Ukrainians are given as good as they're taking. That's not true today, because the graph today would show Ukrainian casualties spiking way up here, Russian casualties flatlining down.
What's this graph? Where is this graph? Can you show this graph?
Down here, and the war is only going to progress in a manner that's worse for the Ukrainians. So, in July, August of 1943, there was a great battle in the Soviet Union during World War II called Kursk. When the battle ended, I don't think there was a military expert on either side, the German side or the Soviet side, that didn't recognize that Germany had lost the war. It was over. This was in, say, July, August 1943. Now, there were still nearly 2 years of war left. So even though the war was lost, it didn't mean the war was over. Ukraine lost this war in May. They lost it when Mariupol fell, because when Mariupol fell, what we had is the Russians perfecting the formula that was repeatable on the battlefield and there was nothing that was going to change that outcome. No amount of military aid provided.
That so far has been only Russia's big success. That has been their only sort of really big success. And even then, it cost them a lot of casualties to take Mariupol. It wasn't like they just walked in and took the place. They took a lot of casualties trying to take Mariupol. Yeah, like I say, we're going to... Hopefully, I think this guy comes up next, but I think we're going to start skipping around the video because there's so much more I think we want to cover. So we'll see what the next guy has
by the
to say.
West. No amount of mobilization on the part of the Ukrainians was going to change this outcome. There's still a lot of fighting left. There's a lot of Ukrainians left to be killed, a lot of territory left to be taken, and unfortunately, a lot of Russians that are still going to be killed and wounded themselves. I'm not trying to pretend that the war is finished, but the war's over. Russia won. There's nothing that's going to happen that's going to change that.
Yeah. War's over, guys. Pack up. Let's go home. Pack up. Let's go home. War's over. What a complete fantasist. I'm sorry. What a lunatic.
Sorry. Yeah, well, I was just wondering though how you see, because it feels like the war is kind of entering this new phase. Because as you mentioned in the beginning, Russia was kind of carelessly storming towards Kiev, with this very thin, long stretch supply control. That's actually to the both of you.
Well, Alexander, I spoke long enough, so you can take this one.
let me make a few comments first about what you said, Scott, if you don't mind. Can I just say, I think you've got everything I'm hearing, the casualty figures that you've discussed are about the right ones. And you said that, Ukraine would have beaten the Western armies, just the West European armies. The British army, the British land army, I believe numbers around 80,000 men. So we are talking about, by June, 190,000 Ukrainian casualties. That is, you can do the maths, and it's much more than the British ground army. And I've actually heard people say this in Britain. They were saying that even before those numbers that were leaked out by the Ukrainian military, that the Ukrainians have lost more men than the British army.
If that is the case, why haven't they lost then? Why have we just had a massive victory for Ukraine in and around, in the northeast? Apparently, the Ukrainians have had more casualties than the entire British army. This is what a lot of these ridiculous pro-Russian people speak about all the time. Oh my God, look at all those, those fantasies, all those, those casualty figures. Where are these casualty figures? Now, we will get some eventually. I think we will. And, it's not like the Ukrainians haven't lost any soldiers fighting this war. But it's not like you can just say, as the bottom guy clearly was, just going, the Russian casualty figures, it's next to nothing. Yeah, don't think so. Nope.
Has to deploy on the battlefield. And I think that, if I can also say, turning attrition against the defender, attrition is supposed to work in favor of the defense, and at least that's what everybody in London seemed to assume. And I can remember this period of wild optimism in April. They were saying to themselves, well, they haven't got Kiev. They're going to attack in Donbass. Donbass is as heavily defended, exactly as you said. The Russians will not be able to break this because the Ukrainians are so well entrenched. The Ukrainian military, turns out, is very strong. And I think this is a factor, by the way, which people had underestimated. I certainly underestimated it. And I think it's also a reason, by the way, why there was a war in the first place, because the Russians undoubtedly were becoming increasingly concerned by this military buildup in Ukraine, and they were getting very worried about it. But putting all that aside, I think there was this big optimism in London, certainly, probably in Washington too. They were saying to themselves, the Russians will not be able to win a war.
Yeah, that is very true. They're not just they are paid. Although, I don't know, they will probably, say they're not paid. They were just paid for a media appearance. But, these people get on, things like Russia Today and all those other type of, very sort of similar programs and sort of channels for a reason. It wouldn't surprise me. In fact, it came out today from I think it was a report from the US. They think that Russia has spent something like, I think in a ridiculous region of about over $300 million in like trying to influence Western countries. And we know there was a lot of Russian interference in Brexit that went on, which has never been investigated. Never been investigated. And I have to wonder how many of these channels, these pro-Russia channels, are themselves get astroturfed by that money. I wouldn't be surprised. It wouldn't surprise me.
War of attrition. The numbers are too heavily stacked against them. And what they've seen is attrition reversing itself. It's the Ukrainians who are suffering the attrition, not the Russians. And I think that there is a quiet, growing horror at the sheer scale of this artillery war, which the British military, at least, has had no real conception of up to this point. And now I often say this, and I say this again: I have no military background, none whatsoever. I've never been in any army.
Again, like I say, I've sped it up, but to be honest, it's just, yeah, Ukrainians are losing. That's it. Russia's winning. God, aren't the Russian military fantastic, guys? Just ignore the reality of what's going on the ground. And like I say, this video was done on the 21st of August, so this was before the big military push. But we've just been on Scott Ritter's channel. He's got, again, pro-Russia video saying, "Oh, don't worry, Russia's going to retake all that territory." I wouldn't be surprised if we checked the what's it called now? The Duma, the Duran. That's it. If we went back to there, I won't be surprised if they've got a video saying, "Don't worry about this, guys. The Ukrainians are losing. This was just a tactical withdrawal. Don't worry about it." Yeah, not really. Every single evidence that we have seen on the ground suggests this was a complete rout. We've seen the communications. We've heard the communications. We've got captured troops confirming those communications. We've got pictures of Russians having breakfast or having to abandon their meals because they were just completely caught off by the speed of this advance. They've left hundreds of thousands of artillery shells, anti-tank shells, tank munitions, tanks. I think someone said it, that those Russia has now become the second largest contributor of military equipment to Ukraine because of this offensive. So yeah, what do you what do you make of guys like this when they sit on this channel and just say, yeah, Ukraine's losing. They're taking, such inflated casualty numbers that if this were actually true, there would have been no way the Ukrainians would have been able to carry out the operation they've just carried out. No way. So, what is it, guys?
I've never served in uniform. I know officers, military officers, but never took an interest in military affairs. I have a lot of knowledge of logistics. And as a sheer logistical exercise, getting all that artillery moving, keeping it supplied with, rounds of ammunition, pouring them out at this sort of level, day after day, week after week, launching all of those missiles. It is staggering. It is a staggering industrial effort. It is a staggering organizational effort. It is one which here in Britain, at least, I could say definitely we are no longer capable of. I think if the United States bent all its resources to do it, it can do it. But no European country by itself could, or even collectively could.
Just that's it, guys. Just give up. Russia just gets its zone of influence back. It gets to, it gets to decide what goes on in these countries now. What? Oh. Yeah. Ukraine had a victory because of Western weapons and intelligence. It wasn't just those Western weapons and intelligence. It was the fact of the Ukrainians using them as well, and using them incredibly effectively. Incredibly effectively. You've got to give it to them in this. Anyway, let's see what else he's got to say.
And we've seen all the ammunition supplies in the West, the stocks.
By the way, this is also not true at this moment, because at the moment in time, the Ukrainians had those HIMARS systems, and they were blowing up ammo dumps left, right, and center on the front line. So even then, by this point, not taking into account that this is an old video, he's still not realizing the reality of what's going on in the ground. But then again, we've just sat and listened to a guy now talk about how brilliant the Russian army is, how they've got all these fantastic commanders, and yet, what have we just seen happen in the last couple of days?
All been run down. In July, Europe stopped sending arms to Ukraine in any number anymore, because we simply cannot sustain this type of war. And it's a war of attrition that's working not just against Ukraine, incredibly, and this is something nobody expected, it's also working against us, by which I mean the militaries in Europe, and which we have no answer for. So I just wanted to make those observations, building on the things that Scott says. If Scott wants to take issue with any of this, then obviously, he will.
The last point, I remember the Chechen leader Kadyrov, he was making the point that after we demilitarize Ukraine, we're going to demilitarize NATO. I thought, he tends to be somewhat bombastic in his language, but there's something to this. I mean, we have across Europe, we've depleted a lot of our military storage, and it's all being shipped as.
So okay. There seemed to be making, well, at least he seemed to be making the argument there, and what this other guy is making the argument of, that we have sent so much military equipment into Ukraine that when Ukraine loses, the rest of Europe will just not have any military equipment. What? It's not like they've just sent over like every single, military equipment going. That's not what's happened. But oh well, okay. Yeah, you want to sort of live in this fantasy, then okay. Let's talk. That's a good point, Alexander. That's a very good point, Alexander. Yeah, the loss of Russian generals. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they've lost around, I think it's 6. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they've lost about 6, like, top military generals of Russia. And bear in mind, that first one in Russia, this includes probably the world, I think, that was the first time since World War II a top military general had been killed. Just think about that for a second. That's insane. Yeah, that's also true. Yeah, pretty hard these days for Russia to still to claim that Ukraine isn't a real country. Kind of painful if you can't defeat a non-existent country. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if Ukraine's not a real country, then you're getting your ass handed to it by you guys. Whoops. It makes me wonder, if these guys have just gambled on this side and have just put so many eggs in that basket that they just can't pull out of it. It really does seem to be that. It really does.
and we see now the numbers dropping, not necessarily because our policy changed, but we don't have the guns anymore. And even if we did, we don't seem to be able to supply weapons fast enough that the Ukrainians are losing them. So it does seem to be.
Doesn't seem to be the case. I'd love to know what his, again, source actually is on that, but that doesn't seem to be the case. We are still supplying Ukraine with weapons. One of the biggest challenges, of course, has been the fact that Ukraine was sort of an ex-Soviet military state. So a lot of their equipment is ex-Soviet. And problem is, with our Western countries, we don't make ammunition and equipment to that standard. So one of the big things that has happened recently because of this is Ukraine has rapidly westernized its military. There is a reason why you have what's called NATO standardization, so that you can have any type of artillery you want, but it all fires the same type of shell or the same type of bullet. There's at the recent NATO talks that we had, the big NATO meeting that we had, where Finland and Sweden joined NATO. One of the things that wasn't talked about, or at least widely reported, was the fact that because of the success of the javelins and the NLAWs, NATO's now said, okay, we now want to sort of have a standardized anti-tank system. So that's huge that they haven't been talking about. There's one of the biggest things, I think I think it came up recently. I can't remember the guy who said it, but I think he's on YouTube. I can't remember his name now, but he's Greek, and he was saying that the Greek army actually has a ton of equipment from that period that they could actually give to Ukraine, but they aren't giving it because of, well, the animosity essentially between obviously them and Turkey, which is still very much a thing. But of course, they're not giving up that equipment because they're worried about Turkey, which again,
very much a losing battle, but again, this is why it's a bit frustrating that we continue to go down the war, even though as Scott said, the war has been lost, but it's not over yet. It feels like we passed that point a long time ago, yet we keep fighting.
Indeed, yes. Now, can I, Scott,
go.
Well, I just want to say a few things, a few quick things. First of all, I am deeply ashamed at the role my country played back in March in aborting what looked to me like a promising possibility of a negotiated solution to this war. We know that we'll be saying more about that, but I'm deeply.
Wait. You're deeply ashamed of the UK? Okay, so these peace talks that have happened, and I say peace talks in huge parentheses because Russia was so confident they were going to win. Just to point out how seriously Russia took these peace talks. They sent their equivalent of Nadine Dorries to these peace talks. So imagine that for a second, that if, like, I don't know, the UK was in a state of war with France, imagine for a second that the peace talks went on and Liz Truss didn't go. Instead, she sent Nadine Dorries, who at the time was the culture secretary. Would you think for a second that France would consider that we were taking these negotiations seriously? I don't think so. So, yeah. And remember, there were 2 peace treaties signed up to by Russia and broken by Russia, Minsk 1 and Minsk 2, which they both broke. You know, these pro-Russia people don't like to talk about those either. Oh no, is that real? Oh, that's depressing. I might have to do a video about that tomorrow then. That's not good. Yeah, very true. Yeah. Wouldn't even think you were taking them seriously if you send trusts. Yeah, very true. Very true.
Deeply upset by this. But coming back to the points that you were making before, Glenn, your question about the fact that the war seems to be changing direction. I'm going to defer to Scott on the military, but I do also get the sense that attrition is now reaching that point where over the horizon, you can see that attrition is going to have its effect. No military can surely absorb the kind of damage that Ukraine has been experiencing day after day, week after week.
Again, listening to all this, again, it doesn't mix with the reality of what's just happened. So yeah, we'll skip forward a couple of bits. Like I say, it's a long video, and yeah,
but they already are. There's already reports that have been trickling through. It's not very clear, but that there's already an Odessa brigade being formed apparently, and that there's going to be more of these units being developed, not militia, but they'll be part of the regular Russian army, presumably. But with these territories, the Russians acquire a reserve manpower pool of people who have been ruled by Ukrainians, who have reasons not to be friendly to Ukrainians because they've been discriminated against. This is something, by the way, in the West, people just will not accept. I mean, you just don't get this acceptance in the West that there's been this very severe discriminatory policy against Russians. But it is a fact. And it will have an effect. People will be prepared to enlist, to fight, to defend their territories, and to sign up into the Russian army to do it. And there's also rumors, and again, I stress these are rumors, but they're so widely spread rumors that I'm sure that there's truth in them, that all sorts of volunteer brigades, in other words, reservists, are being recruited back in Russia to build up infantry manpower, essentially. I think the one thing that the Russians have been short of in this war, Scott knows more about this than I do, but is infantry. But they will gradually bring up, they will have more infantry through all these volunteer forces, through the fact, as I said, that they'll be able to recruit manpower in these particular regions. And that will, I think, over time, weigh the balance even more. I mean,
doesn't look like it at the moment. It doesn't look like it at the moment. Like I say, I think you get the idea. I really think you do. It's an hour and a half interview, and I think you get the idea by now. I don't think we need to cover the rest of it.
It just, again, I don't see the purpose behind this. There's no plan. There's no one behind the wheel. It's quite shocking to see all these things play out.
It is absolutely shocking. Can I just say? I mean, I can remember the United States. I mean, I should say my background. I was somebody who had an enormous admiration for the United States. I still do. After week, what can the Chinese do?
Discussion about nuclear disarmament.
Yeah, but I think you get. I think you get the idea, guys. I think you get it. Yeah. I think you get the idea by this point that they are absolutely they're cuckoo. They're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Cuckoo. Yeah. Can't even say it. Cuckoo. Yeah, they're mad. Whatever, Yeah, that is the level of pro. In fact, let's watch their Cope video about.
All right, Alexander, let's talk about
what's happened this weekend. So calm in the Kremlin, SMO plan for now, ATO remains. Okay, this might be interesting to watch. EU is unable to stop economic collapse, pinning their hopes on Zelensky.
All right, Alexander,
This might be fun to watch. Although I actually no, tell you what, I don't want to watch any more videos of these guys because I know what it's going to be. I already know what it's going to be. So let's instead take a trip to our good old good old pal. Our good old buddy and pal. You know him. It's time for some Jeff. Oh, what should we do? Oh, you see, that might be good. A reminder. That might be talking about. Actually, I tell you what, we'll go for that one.
Hello.
Oh yes, it was already sped up.
Oh there. Many people can be sucked into thinking that our current financial woes are isolated to the UK and caused by Brexit, but it just isn't so. The UK has been hit by rising energy costs, and inflation has been surging upwards as a result. And all the while, the Ramonas are bubbling in the background, telling us how much better it would be for us if we were still in the EU, or even that we should rejoin and take on the euro, something we would have to do under the EU treaties. But the EU and Eurozone are not having it any better than us.
Yeah, for different reasons. For different reasons, basically, for different reasons. Oh my God, you're all right. Is this Mike Lindell's long lost cousin? Is this Mike Lindell's cousin? I don't know. It might very well be. Oh, Chthonic, hello to you. I didn't see you sneak in there. But evening to you. Oh, Jean-Luc Picard, good evening to you as well. And like I say, good evening to anyone else that I've missed. Oh, Tom Nielsen, good evening to you as well. I didn't see you sneak in there. But yeah, different reasons. But a large part of our problem at the moment is being caused by Brexit, like it or not. The fact that we are having such problems trying to sort of, export stuff to the EU, still one of our biggest markets, still a pretty big problem, Jeff. Still a pretty much big problem. Not only that, but as a lot of people have said, we've left. We've left. What is it? The European energy market. So now, being a third country, we now have to engage in auctions where previously we weren't. Everyone sort of shared it out equally, but now we're having to buy more expensive energy from the EU because we pulled out of that system.
Due to the news being thoroughly dominated in the UK by the death of Her Majesty the Queen, it may have passed many people by that the European Central Bank was forced yesterday to hike interest rates by 0.75%. Something that puts the ECB deposit rate into positive territory for the first time since 2011. And the increase is also the largest since the euro was launched in 1999, except for a 3-week period at the start to stabilise the launch.
Is Jeff going to predict the fall of the euro? Can we predict the fall of the euro? Will Jeff say in this video, I am predicting now, Jeff is going to say the euro is going to fall. The euro is going to collapse any moment. I'm predicting this now.
And many people are calling this too little too late. And the ECB governor, Christine Lagarde, put her hand up and admitted they'd got the inflation forecasts wrong, as she vowed to raise rates as required in future. So not just the UK then. However, what did surprise many was that Lagarde predicted there would be no Eurozone recession and that inflation would average out at 8.1% this year, 5.5% next year, and back to the target 2% zone in 2024. Sounds very optimistic to me. And
Yes, not only is it optimistic, it's probably possible considering the fact of, well, the Eurozone doesn't have to face the type of challenges that we do, the fact that, we are not in, sort of the single market customs union anymore is a massive effect on our economy. There are numerous other things that are specifically tied to us as a country that are going to be our problems. For example, Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng's fantasy libertarian economic ideology, which we're probably going to get to see in the next couple of weeks, which, oh boy, is that going to be fun? Yeah.
The Telegraph said that many economists expect the Eurozone to go into recession by the end of the year. But with more and more governments, including the UK, stepping in by increasing their national debts to keep energy costs down for consumers and increasingly for businesses as well, then the apparent rate of inflation might well go down more than expected. Inflation is lower in France because they capped their energy price rise at 4% for domestic consumers. But it's cost them 24 billion euros plus to achieve it. It wasn't free, even though the French system is largely national.
But that's a good thing, Jeff. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. The French did a good thing, thereby by sort of not only nationalizing the rest of their energy industry, but putting a cap on. That was a good thing. And I think they've paid for it by windfall tax as well. In fact, I think von der Leyen came out, I think it was today or might have been yesterday. She came out and started saying that the EU should do a big windfall tax on energy companies so that, that money goes to people who need it the most. It's quite a good idea, Jeff. It's quite a good idea. Not everything the EU does is bad. I know that might be a hard concept for you to understand, Jeff, but that's the truth.
Nationalised. And looking at the significant intervention that the UK government is about to make into our energy market, then we might also see inflation start tumbling here too. But it's all smoke and mirrors. We're robbing Peter to pay Paul. If we're going to go down this risky path, then when publishing these inflation figures, the Bank of England needs to publish the national debt inflation figures in bold print right alongside them. That might raise some eyebrows amongst the public. For example, due mainly to the pandemic and later partly due to the Russia-Ukraine war, our national debt increased by 7.4% in the year to April 2021 and 6.4% in the year to April 2022.
And Brexit's got nothing to do with that. It's just the pandemic. It's just the Russia-Ukraine war. Nothing to do with Brexit. Of course, Jeff. Of course.
And it now stands at just about £2.5 trillion, with stacks more borrowing to come. And we pay interest on every pound of that debt. Now, it may be something we need to do, something we have to do, but the costs and repercussions should be made clearer to us. It's our money after all.
So there you go. That's Jeff Taylor. There you go. That's your Jeff. That's your Jeff for today. So yeah, I like I say, I hope you've enjoyed today. Like I say, we've had a lot of, shall we say, non-news. I'd say recently it's been very, very much dominated by the death of the Queen for the past couple of days, and it will still be dominated by the Queen pretty much. The funeral hasn't even happened yet, and I'm all funeraled out already. So yeah, this is as usual, I hope you've enjoyed this little trip. Like I say, we covered Ukraine, and like so we haven't covered sort of what's been going on in Ukraine for quite a while, though I've wanted to. But I've just been sort of keeping an eye on it, to watch stuff happening like we've seen today. Hopefully this collapse of the Russian forces does continue. Hopefully we will see the liberation of Ukraine and the rest of Ukraine, and they will get to make their own choices, not be an economic slave to Russia, which is what they want. But yes, I hope you've enjoyed today. Something a bit different. We'll have to see what happens next week, of course. But as always, we'll see. Oh, I'm saying a lot. I'm getting tired. But yes, we will see you all next weekend for the Good Morning Walk. We will talk about what's been going on this week. Not gonna lie, heavily dominated by the Queen's death and sort of the ongoing and all the pomp and circumstance that we've had this week. Although I will try and do something good that's not that, because I've said I'm funeraled out. I think a lot of other people are funeraled out as well in the UK. So I will try and sort of provide you a better show that's not to do with the Queen's funeral. So hope you will enjoy that. Like I say, I hope you've enjoyed today's show. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. There is also the YouTube thank you button if you're on YouTube as well, if you want to use that. For one-off donation link, there's the Pony Club as well. You can join as well, where you get badges, emojis, and whatnot. And remember, if you are supporting me on Patreon, or you are a member of the Pony Club, I've just done our new weekly video that is out today as well. So if you are a member of that, you can watch not only the new one, but you can go watch the past ones as well. So if you subscribe to me on Patreon or through the YouTube one, then you get that as well. So as always, thank you very much for joining me this evening. Like I say, I hope you've enjoyed yourselves. And as always, we'll see you all very soon next time. So until then, see you soon.